most of America, Betty Grable was the safest fantasy Hollywood ever created. But behind that flawless image, something far less comforting was unfolding. She married a former child star whose fortune mysteriously vanished, a collapse so severe it rewrote Hollywood law forever. She became famous not for what she could do on screen, but for a body part insured for $1 million, turning her into a product before she could become an artist. She spent 22 years in a marriage built on silence, absorbing betrayal to protect a national myth during wartime. And when the world no longer needed that myth, Hollywood didn't destroy her. It simply stopped calling. No scandal. No public breakdown. Just fewer roles. Smaller paychecks. And a slow disappearance from the spotlight she once owned. So here's the uncomfortable question Hollywood never asked. Was Betty Grable a star who lost her moment, or a symbol who was never allowed to outgrow the role she was assigned? This is not the story we were told. This is what really happened. A marriage that exposed Hollywood's dark economics. In 1937, Betty Grable married Jackie Coogan, one of the most famous former child stars in America. On the surface, it looked like a fairy tale union, two young celebrities raised by the same Hollywood system, both famous before they were fully grown. But the reality was far darker. The marriage lasted only 3 years, ending in 1940. Both Grable and Coogan had earned substantial incomes as minors, yet neither had real control over their finances. When the marriage collapsed, a shocking truth surfaced. Coogan discovered that nearly all the money he had earned as a child actor was gone, legally spent by his parents. What followed was historic. Jackie Coogan sued his own family, and the case sparked public outrage. Between 1939 and 1940, it led to the creation of the Coogan Law, legislation designed to protect the earnings of child performers from exploitation. Betty Grable did not join the lawsuit. She remained silent. Yet her brief marriage placed her at the centre of one of Hollywood's most important legal turning points, proof that beneath the glamour, the system was quietly consuming its youngest stars. $1 million legs, fame or objectification. At the height of her stardom, Betty Grable was transformed from a performer into a marketing phenomenon. Her studio famously insured her legs for $1 million, a staggering figure in the 1,940 seconds, equivalent to approximately $18–20 million today. The announcement was not accidental. It was a calculated publicity move designed to turn a human being into a headline. Almost overnight, the narrative around Betty Grable shifted. The media no longer focused on her timing, her musical ability, or her discipline as a dancer. Instead, coverage centered on her body, her pin-up image, her legs as a commercial asset rather than part of a performer's craft. Her iconic pin-up photograph spread worldwide, reinforcing this single image again and again. For millions of soldiers, she became a symbol of longing and comfort. For Hollywood, she became something else entirely, a brand. The long-term consequences were subtle but devastating. Because her appeal was framed almost exclusively around physical perfection, studios rarely considered her for serious dramatic roles. Scripts that explored emotional depth or psychological conflict went elsewhere. Betty Grable was consistently cast in musicals and light comedies, roles designed to preserve her image rather than challenge it. This created a deep paradox. The very image that made her one of the most bankable stars in American history also became an invisible ceiling. As tastes changed and audiences began demanding realism and complexity, Hollywood quietly moved on. Grable, once indispensable, was suddenly seen as outdated, not because she lacked talent, but because the industry had never allowed her to show anything else. Million-dollar legs gave her global fame, financial power, and cultural immortality. But it also froze her identity in time, reducing a multifaceted performer to a single, endlessly repeated image. In the end, the question lingers. Was Betty Grable celebrated for who she was, or for what Hollywood decided she should represent? A 22-year marriage built on silence. In 1943, at the height of World War II, Betty Grable married bandleader Harry James. To the public, it looked like the perfect wartime romance. Hollywood's most beloved pin. Girl united with one of America's most famous musicians, the marriage would last 22 years, produce 2 children, and become one of the longest celebrity unions of the era. But behind the carefully maintained image, the reality was far less ideal. Harry James was widely known in entertainment circles for his repeated infidelities. Over the years, the marriage endured multiple affairs, leading to 2 periods of separation, followed by reconciliations that were never fully explained to the public. Despite the emotional strain, Betty Grable never turned these struggles into public scandal. There were no explosive interviews, no courtroom dramas splashed across headlines. Her silence was strategic and deeply symbolic. During wartime and its aftermath, Grable was not just a movie star. She was a national icon, a symbol of stability, femininity, and moral reassurance for millions of Americans. A public divorce or scandal could have shattered that image. Instead, she chose restraint, presenting herself as the ideal wife and mother, perfectly aligned with the expectations placed on women of that era. The personal cost was immense. By prioritizing her public role over private truth, Grable effectively erased her own emotional reality from the narrative. She absorbed betrayal quietly, maintaining composure while continuing to work, appear in public, and fulfill the role Hollywood demanded of her. In doing so, she protected not only her career, but also the larger myth. She represented the wholesome, dependable star America could trust. When the marriage finally ended in Iten Jobai Loshawu, the separation came without spectacle. No dramatic revelations followed. The story simply closed, as if it had never truly existed in public view. In the end, Betty Grable didn't just perform on screen. She performed stability itself and paid for it with years of personal silence, sacrificed for the sake of a national symbol. Left behind as Hollywood changed. By the early 1950 seconds, the Hollywood that had made Betty Grable indispensable was quietly disappearing. Audiences who once craved colour, spectacle, and reassurance after years of war began turning towards psychological depth, realism, and emotional darkness. The industry followed their lead. A new generation rose quickly. Faces like Marilyn Monroe and Elizabeth Taylor embodied a different kind of stardom, more provocative, more conflicted, more aligned with a post-war world questioning old ideals. Hollywood no longer needed symbols of comfort. It wanted intensity. Betty Grable did nothing wrong. There was no scandal to explain her decline. No public meltdown. No headline making fall from grace. Instead, the change was administrative and quiet. Offers slowed. The number of leading roles dropped sharply. Her once commanding salary began to decline year by year. Projects that did come her way were smaller, savage, and less central. She appeared less frequently, and when she did, it was often as a reminder of a bygone era rather than a vital force in the present one. This was not a collapse, it was an erosion. Hollywood did not reject Betty Grable. It simply stopped needing what she represented. The cheerful pin-up, the musical star. The wartime fantasy no longer fit the emotional tone of the age. As studios chased modernity, Grable was gently pushed to the margins, not with cruelty, but with indifference. What makes this moment her greatest drama is its silence. There were no farewell tributes, no final triumphant role, no acknowledgement that one of the most profitable stars in film history was stepping out of the spotlight. She faded from the centre not because she failed, but because the system had moved on to something newer and younger. For a woman who once dominated American screens for a decade, this quiet disappearance was more devastating than scandal could ever be. It revealed a harsh truth at the heart of Hollywood. Even the brightest stars are only permanent until the era that created them ends. And when that moment comes, the exit is rarely announced. An open question. By every measurable standard, Betty Grable had everything Hollywood could offer. Fame, wealth, power at the box office. For a full decade, she was not just successful, she was essential to the industry that built her. And yet, beneath the carefully maintained image, she was rarely allowed to exist as herself. Her identity was shaped, preserved, and repeated until it became a symbol larger than the woman behind it. Hollywood celebrated what she represented, but never fully explored who she was. So the question remains not just about Betty Grable, but about the system that created her? When is a career truly successful? Is it when someone becomes the defining icon of an entire era, or when they are given the freedom to step away from the spotlight without being erased? What really happened to Betty Grable may not be a story of scandal or collapse, but of a quieter cost. The price of becoming an icon the world never wanted to let change,